Thanks for listening to the Zain Battla podcast. We officially have merch, and right now 100% of the profits are going to PCRF, Palestine Children's Relief Fund. We got hoodies, we got t-shirts, and again, 100% of the profits going right to PCRF. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I want to thank you for supporting my work. Brother, what's that?
Can you imagine a sheikh going viral? That's so funny to me. I don't know why.
I mean, the thing is, he's pretty well known in Australia, Muhammad Hoblos. I don't know if he's a convert
You know
or not.
his name.
Yeah, I've listened to some of his lectures prior. He's a very passionate individual. But I was saying, brother, because that's not Starbucks, is it?
No, not Starbucks. Cancel Starbucks. Boycott Starbucks.
All right, you heard it. You heard it here first. When did your advocacy for Palestine kind of begin, or what was your advocacy before October 7th to now?
Well, it all started October 7th. So when I was in high school, I lived in a really small town, and I was bullied for being Muslim, for being Arab. So I tried to dilute that as much as I could, which is really disappointing in retrospect, like as I got older. But it was so difficult to just be myself, to be Muslim. My mom wears hijab, and I was surrounded by like all these racist white people. It was crazy. And they used to call me like by my dad's name because it's my middle name. And they pretty much dehumanized me for like all of high school. So I kind of had it like stuck in my head, like, okay, the more I hide this part of my identity, the easier life will be, because it's very evident that people don't like Muslims, especially where I was. People don't like Palestinians. And I was always raised like to know the truth, but to understand that the Western media will always misconstrue it, so that when people are talking about it in school, that it wasn't worth fighting with them, because they're not going to be convinced of anything otherwise. So to just kind of like, say your piece and then don't argue further than that. When I was in college, I met somebody who was like super interested in the Palestinian conflict. And so I was like their first introduction. And I found myself being people's first introduction to Palestine often. And I pretty much went my whole life, like if somebody asked me, oh, where are you from? Well, I'm from Raleigh. And they'd be like, no, where are you really from? And I would never answer. I would always just be like, I'm really from Raleigh. Or like, where are your parents from? I'm like, from Michigan. Like, I would never tell people I was Palestinian until somebody was like, what is your nationality? Then I'd be like, I'm Palestinian. I'm Middle Eastern. But when I got to college and like people started to show interest, like I would talk about it with them up until, their questions were answered. And even when there was other conflict going on in Palestine, like I never posted about it, because I always had the mentality like, what am I gonna do by posting about it? I'm gonna upset people, and like this stuff is so gruesome and upsetting that it won't encourage people to look into it. It'll actually just make them look away. So I didn't ever really say anything. And even when October 7th happened, I still stayed like silent because I didn't know what to say. But I pretty much like heard the news, and my dad was like, group chat was popping. Okay, family group chat was popping. My dad was talking about how they surprise attacked the borders and blah, 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 and this and that. And then it came out like, okay, they attacked the festival. So I asked my dad, like, why would they attack a festival? Like, what business did they have there? And my dad was like, Baba, they don't attack civilians. And I'm like, but Dad, it says here, Hamas killed people at a festival. Why would they kill people at a festival? And he was like, it's either an accident or it's not them. And I'm like, okay, but they're retaliating because they killed civilians at a festival. And he just kept saying, Hamas does not kill civilians. And so I was like, all right, whatever. Well, then it obviously came out that it was Israel who killed their own civilians. And the music festival was actually moved. Like the location of the festival was moved a couple days prior to when the festival took place. And so when it came out that Israel actually attacked their own civilians, I told my dad, I was like, listen, sometimes my dad, like when he retells history, he tells it in the wrong way. But like for the most part, like it all checks out. Like, you know, he has this like he reads all the news and he consumes all the news. But then when he goes to like retell it, something about it just seems like so bizarre. But when I looked into it, I was like, wait, he kind of is making sense. So I like sat down with him that night on October 7th. And I just was like, tell me how all of this came to be. Because obviously I was raised this way. Like I always knew Palestinian history. I always knew, you know, Israel's the bad guy. Israel's made up. Israel created their own country. And I've been to Palestine. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the border patrol. I've seen the military presence. I've seen, you know, me and my mom, my sisters, like sitting in the Jisr waiting just to be berated with questions. Where are you going? What are you doing here? How long are you staying? And like, where are you staying? Because if they don't pick up the phone and they don't match your story, you're not getting in. And it's hot. And my mom is, you know, with 3 girls and like handling it all on her own. And it's just, I've seen it. But I didn't know, like I had so many missing pieces of the timeline. So just like sat down with him. We had like a super long conversation about it. And then I remember I actually was at urgent care and I like just posted this Malcolm X quote that was, you know, the person who stays silent in the face of oppression is enabling the oppressor. And from that point, like, I just sat in front of my phone and I started to talk about it. And I was like, if we're all gonna talk about it, like before it was just like, I see Palestinian people talking about it, I see Middle Eastern people talking about it. But if we're all gonna talk about it, we're gonna talk about the truth. We're not gonna sit here and like, let the Western media skew our vision of what's actually taking place. Because what's actually taking place is being covered by this like Zionist influenced media, where like when we're in college, they tell us you have to use peer-reviewed sources. You can't just use a news article. These things are not viable sources. So now all of a sudden, when we're always taught, don't always believe everything you read on the internet, we have people who are just blatantly reading a headline and they're like, oh, okay, we stand with Israel and their right to defend itself. What? Like, defend itself against what? Mm-hmm. They put everything into place. They are defending themselves against a terrorist group that they enabled, they brought up, they funded. And so from that point on, I just was just talking to my phone. Like I was just sitting in my room talking to my phone. And then people started to tell me like, I learned this from you. I didn't know any of this before you said something about it. And so people just were encouraging me in that way because I was kind of making the media more digestible. Because at first, I wouldn't post any of the like super gruesome content because it's hard. It's a hard thing to watch and it's a hard thing to digest. So what I did in the beginning was I would read the headlines, I would, you know, digest the information, then I would sit in front of my phone and regurgitate it in like a more easy to understand manner. So that people, like, when they read the headlines, they would just go to my page and they would, like, understand what this headline means. And they wouldn't have to read the article because I did it for them, which is kind of a cop-out in a way. But the more that I did it, the more people started to tell me, like, I finally understand what's going on because of you. Right. So it made me motivated in that way to continue to speak on the topic. And honestly, for a while, it didn't even feel right to, like, live normal life. So it just kind of became my life. Like everything I saw, I would just go and like sit in front of my phone and record a video about it. And I guess that's where it all started.
Yeah, and I think going back to, I guess, my background and upbringing, even though it was primarily in the Desi community, did have Palestinian friends, did have Arab friends. So there was such a high amount of Muslims that I would have in my own echo chamber. So talking about Palestine, if you're talking about 2014 or if you're talking about 2021, whatever you're talking about regarding Palestine, going to a protest, it was very easy to do in Houston, Texas, because there were so many Muslims, so many pro-Palestinian, not just Muslims, but advocates essentially that were going to protest, that were speaking up. But I can imagine in Raleigh, North Carolina, where there's a much smaller Muslim community, maybe not as much now because everybody and their mom's moving there, but at the time growing up, you probably made friends with a lot of non-Muslims, which I did in high school. Once I got into college, kind of stayed in that Muslim echo chamber because it was easy and comfortable. But for you, you were not given that ability to stay in that echo chamber, given that Raleigh probably didn't have as many Muslims. So given that, do you think that maybe before October 7th, when you were saying that, oh yeah, I didn't really talk about Palestine because it wasn't something easy to talk about, or it wasn't really as top of mind as it is now, do you think it's a lot easier now to talk about it since October 7th to non-Muslims and non-Palestinians or non-Arabs? Or do you think maybe you're still having some of those challenges because most people in Raleigh are Zionist, or most of the systems in place in Raleigh support Zionism? Is there any challenges that you're having there?
Well, I want to address that. I grew up in the Muslim community in Raleigh, and I did have a lot of Muslim friends growing up, but I think where it kind of got lost in translation is that the Muslim community is very exclusive in Raleigh, and I never felt like I needed to be put in that bubble. So I kind of ventured out. And I found myself having more in common with non-Muslims and still holding ties to my religion. I think now it's honestly a breath of fresh air. The amount of people who are receiving the information so well that are open to asking questions, and I like to think of myself as like a very approachable person. And I always tell people, like, even in the beginning, I literally made it so clear, if you take a stance as pro-Palestine in this high intense environment, if you're going to take a stand on the right side, I will fight with Zionists in your DMs. I'll fight with the people who are fighting with you. I'll fight in your comments, and I will educate you to the nines. I will equip you with the correct information to fight with anybody who comes your way. And I found myself like being an open invitation for people asking questions and learning more about the topic. And in that, it kind of, there's, as cliche as it is, there's a lot of power in knowledge. And it's like the best way for us to fight against all of the skewed media and stuff like that. So I think that now it's an easier topic of conversation, and to be honest, it's like the only thing that I feel like I can talk about anymore, because nothing feels normal. Nothing is like I go and I get coffee and I'm like, I hope whoever's at Starbucks today is having a bad day. Or like when we were driving here and we see the homeless population, and it's like, if only we weren't sending all of our money to Israel, we could help house these people. And so it's like on the forefront of my brain all the time. It's like the only thing I can talk about. And so I found myself kind of distancing from the people who can't talk about it like that, because I don't want to feel like a burden to anybody where I'm talking about the onslaught taking place in my homeland and they're just like going about their merry day. I don't run in those circles anymore. And even though it's not always necessarily the Muslim community that I find myself in. Like, I have found myself in a very wide variety of people who can talk about Palestine all the time, who can relate everything back to Palestine. And it's not that I like strive for that, because I'm not the kind of person who like just makes one thing my entire personality, but it's ongoing. And the longer it goes on, the less normalized I feel like it needs to be. Like, the longer it goes on, the more we should be like,
Right.
What is going on? Like, why is this going on for so long? And how can we, as like, I guess the people fighting the fight on this end, not feel survivor's guilt, not feel like we have to keep talking about it. There's no other way to go about daily life anymore.
Right. Yeah, even with me and the podcast, I have a diverse set of interests and topics that I like to talk to, but it seems that my discussions always go back to what's happening in Palestine, and it's because, as you said, the consequences are so dire. I didn't go in with the intention of making this podcast about Palestine, but what's happening is something that's a reality that needs to be discussed, that needs to be talked about. When you're just going about your day, going to the supermarket, going to the mall, and maybe Palestine's on your mind, and you see everybody else happy, joyful, cheering, you wonder that, well, are these people A, pro-Palestine, B, pro-Israel, or are they don't really care because it's too complex or it's too difficult to understand, and we'd rather just stay in our bubble and stay in an area of comfort. But I do think that, at least when it comes to the majority of the population, sure, there was the headlines and articles, there was Western media. A lot of people are starting to deviate away from that and starting to go towards independent media, especially, our generation, even, Gen X, a lot of them are moving towards independent media. And a lot of these Zionists are either A, uninformed and are just swallowing whatever the media feeds them, or they just don't want to admit that Israel's committing genocide for whatever reason, financial, mostly financial interest, but also just maybe it's just a sense of pride of, I don't want to be wrong, I don't want to be incorrect.
Yeah. It's honestly, it reminds me of a couple things. First of all, in 2014, there was a Chapel Hill shooting that killed some of our family friends, and it was a hate crime. And I remember on the day of their funeral, we were driving down Hillsborough Street, and we were passing by the school that they went to, and I just remember seeing people just like walking on the street, and I was so angry and upset that like 24 hours ago, my world was rocked. Mm-hmm. And these people are just walking on the street and they just don't even know about it. And it was like a very defining moment for me, because my brother always taught me the world doesn't stop for you, which is true. The world does not stop. When you're feeling this feeling of like despair, utter despair, and almost grieving, even with the people in Palestine, like you're grieving every single day. You're grieving something or somebody. And the world is not going to stop just because you're feeling these feelings. And also to that, it reminds me of when the election was taking place in 2020 between Biden and Trump. And I was working at He Who Shall Not Be Named coffee shop. And
ooh, brother, ooh.
Brother, ooh, yeah. And I remember we were watching the election because, it was COVID and they were counting the votes for days, and it was just such a high, intense situation. And everybody who came through the drive-thru that I served that day, I would just like, it just felt so intense. I couldn't describe it. Like, I'm a brown person serving you coffee, and you're like a white man driving a big truck. And I'm sitting here like, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Are you pro deporting my people? Or are you pro genocide, I guess now?
Yeah.
And so like the dichotomy between the two is still like always on my mind. Like, I pass people in the store and I'm like, wow, that person's definitely pro-Israel. And it's hard. It creates such a like crazy unspoken divide. And it makes like almost every environment kind of hostile because you just never know. And I'm now very openly Palestinian. I mean, I wear like my Palestine gear all the time. Like I'm decked out. I got my necklace on like all the time. So like it just takes one person to notice and it just changes up their demeanor. Sometimes for the best, sometimes it's not. Sometimes people get mean. Sometimes people get sad. Like I had one time somebody asked me like, "Oh, I love your necklace. Do you have family in Palestine?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have family." She started crying. I'm like, "Girl, this is TJ Maxx. Get it together, please." But yeah, I mean, there are some people who feel so intensely about it and like it just is so, I feel like I'm always on edge, like just waiting to find out or just waiting to see if somebody will notice my necklace or if somebody will say something to me, or like sometimes I go out in a kafia and I like have to always look over my shoulder and like make sure that I'm vigilant of my surroundings. And it's scary. It creates like a very high anxiety situation like all the time.
And the despair situation or the sense of desperation, it's very real for a lot of us because you almost expect that if this many people are aware of this genocide happening, everybody is posting videos of actual beheaded babies, of skulls that are coming out of Rafah. It's very disturbing that you would think that, oh, all this stuff is circulating. People either have seen these pictures or people who haven't seen these pictures should at least know what's happening. And even then, things aren't stopping. And it would be one thing that if something happened in your life, maybe you expect the world to stop, but it doesn't. But when 40,000 people have been killed, when one of the worst massacres so far has happened in Rafah, even when Rafah was supposedly supposed to be the red line, it's just, you expect the government to do something. I mean, you don't expect the government to do anything at this point.
Never.
But
no expectations from the government.
Yeah, no expectations from the government. But you would think at some point, okay, more people would step in, or this time Israel's finally gonna get accountability for what it's done. And sure, more and more countries are coming out at a slow pace of recognizing Palestinian statehood.
Too slow.
But it's almost as if at this point the statehood is important, the recognition, but lives are still constantly being lost. And the fingers that need to be pointed to Israel by our administration, they're being blindsided or purposely being blindsided by anything that Israel may do. It's almost like Israel just has a free-for-all to do whatever with no repercussions.
Honestly, at this point, I don't even know what more we need to see for it to stop. It has created like, I don't want to say hopelessness because I feel like as soon as we lose hope, that's exactly what they want. That's exactly how they'll continue this. But I don't know what more needs to come out of Gaza to get people to see that this is wrong.
We don't want more to come out of Gaza.
I know. We want it to stop. There's no... I'm at a loss for words, honestly, at like the amount of people who still are saying Hamas, 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 or like they beheaded babies in October. And I remember being so distraught when I realized Biden was lying. I was like crying to my dad. I'm like, how can he go on national television and lie to all these people?
He's a politician.
I mean, that's true. It's true.
I think a lot of people, sorry, I know you want to finish your thought. I think a lot of people have opened up their eyes, especially with this conflict, that it's not red versus blue. It's the elite Zionists versus the common man.
Yes.
And some of the common men are blindly siding with the elite Zionists.
Like the people who say, let's go Brandon, because they're pro-Trump, but now all of a sudden, because Biden is supporting genocide, they're not like, let's go Brandon. They're like, I support Biden. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like pure stupidity and ignorance. And it's so frustrating. Like, honestly, like I was saying, I just don't know what more can convince these people. Like, how, I don't know what kind of state of mind you need to be stuck in to just not like look up and be like, hey, genocide is bad. How hard can that be to say killing people who are native to this land is bad? Even if you don't believe they're native to the land, is killing 40,000 people justifiable in any sense? No. There is never any reason that anybody could look at what's going on. I just can't fathom. I can't fathom it. My issue is also oftentimes not even with the people who are indoctrinated. Like, I can be understanding to Israelis who were raised to think like Palestinians are bad. If you don't shoot first, they'll kill you. This is how you justify killing innocent people. And I'm understanding to that. They learn a different version of history. Where people lose me is when they're just plain old stupid. Like, I can deal with a lot, but I cannot deal with the stupid. Those are the people who get me. They make me like angry cry, because it's like, what is actually wrong with you? Like, you're just being ignorant, like blatantly being ignorant. I just literally cannot deal with it. When I start to realize that, okay, this person, there's no convincing them, they're just plain stupid, that's when I'm like, all right, you got it. Like, I'm not even gonna waste my time.
But I guess a different approach you took with Raleigh City Council,
Yeah.
because we can get into that, is you just kept going multiple times trying to convince City Council to pass a ceasefire resolution or at least acknowledge the atrocities that were happening in Palestine. So how was your experience with Raleigh City Council?
So I, believe it or not, hate public speaking. I hate it. I am not good at it. The first time I went up there, I literally stopped breathing the entire time. Like 3 minutes. I was given 3 minutes to address the situation, and I just completely stopped breathing. Like, it just took me back to college when I had to do like public presentations, and like when I took public speaking, like my teacher always told me, you're a great public speaker. And I'm like, you couldn't tell I wasn't breathing? Like, what is wrong with you? But I just saw like an ad for it, and it was like, did you know you can speak to Raleigh City Council and get them to pass a ceasefire resolution? I'm like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. So I went, I spoke, and people were like in awe. And I was like, y'all, I didn't say anything special. I just gave the stats. I said they're native to the land. And I just asked them to be like empathetic. Like, people are literally dying, Kim. Why can we not recognize that? So I went the first time. I signed up a second time a month later, because I was like, it's been a month. If they're not gonna, maybe I'll sign up and maybe it'll get canceled. Like, maybe we just won't have to go because they'll pass a ceasefire. Well, the second time I went, when I was on my way there, I'm told like they're gonna reduce our time from 3 minutes to 1 minute. And I was like, okay, well, that's un-American. Like, we're going to a government building to speak with our elected officials, and they're gonna limit our freedom of speech? Interesting. So I gave my speech the second time, and I told the mayor, who has an Israeli flag on her Facebook profile picture, so she's openly pro-Israel. She sent a tweet about beheaded babies. Like, she is clearly brainwashed for whatever reason. And when I finished my speech, I told her, if you don't pass a ceasefire resolution, you can be prepared to be sick of me. And I can tell jokes, but I'll never tell a lie. So I had to make good on my promise, naturally. So I kept going back. And the more I went back, the sassier I got, because I started to professionally. Like, I was like very professional, very, just addressing the facts and the issues. And like, that didn't get across to them. The point of going to Raleigh City Council is so that our government, our elected officials in Raleigh, can pass up the pressure to whoever's above them and then get it passed up and eventually get to the president to call for a ceasefire. Well, the president called for a ceasefire and nothing happened. We'll get into that later. Besides the point, I kept going to Raleigh City Council, and then one day it was actually the Raleigh City Council that took place on the second day of Ramadan. And I was fasting, and everybody was asking me, like, are you gonna go? Are you gonna go? And I was like, honestly, I have no idea. Like, I don't wanna break my fast in front of that witch. Like, I feel like I don't know. It's just like a bad environment. Like, maybe I'll break my fast and then I'll decide. Well, I broke my fast, and then I was like, you know what, I'll just go. So I went, and I was on my way there, and I was texting in this group chat of people who go, and I was like, if they call my name, like, let me know. And they're like, they already called your name. Where are you? There's only like 10 people left. And I'm like, I'm pulling up. I walk into the room. I didn't write a speech. I used a speech from the archives. And I walk into the room, pull up an old speech from months ago that I had written. And the last speaker on the schedule is speaking. And so I walk up to like one of my friends, and she's like, go find the lady in the clipboard. And I'm like, there is no lady with a clipboard. And then she's like, just go. And I was like, what? She's like, go. And I was like, no, I'm not the type of person to insert myself. If I'm called, I'll go. But I'm not gonna like just walk up and be like, excuse me, because I don't like the pressure of like all eyes on you.
Right.
Back to the public speaking thing. So I was like, no. And she's like, go. And I was like, okay. So I walk up to the podium, and I was like, hi, I'm a little bit late, but I was on the schedule to speak. And then she's like, okay, go ahead. So I give the speech. It's 1 minute and 11 seconds long because it was from the past where they only gave us like a minute to speak.
Yep.
Well, this time they gave us 2 minutes. So it's like, started out my speech, 2 minutes. What am I to do with all this time? Little did I know that line would haunt me for the rest of my life. I go home. There's this, my hairdresser, she posts all the Raleigh City Council speeches. And she posted mine that night, and it got a lot of traction. I was like, this is weird. Like, it's midnight. It's like 1 a.m, when people are not active.
Yeah.
And all the Zionists are like commenting on her stuff, like, hating, boosting the post. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I posted on TikTok at 1 a.m. Again, so much traction for 1 a.m. I was like, this is so strange. And then I go to sleep. And I wake up the next day. Where the Peace posted my video. Land Palestine posted my video. Bella and Gigi Hadid's sister posted my video to her story. And I'm like, what is going on? Alana Hadid. I'm going to put some respect on her name. I was like, what is going on? Like, this is the worst speech I've given in the last 6 months. And then everybody's like, they gave her 2 minutes. She ate them up in 1. I'm like, little do y'all know. I'm exposing myself now. But like, that was a speech from the archives. I just used it because I went in last minute, and it just blew up. And I was a private account up until this point, and I had over 1,000 follow requests that like my Instagram was starting to crash. People were commenting on the video like, you inspire me, like, Danyah for president, and like all this stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? Then more people started to post the video, repost the video. And then before I knew, it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And like I said, I do not like all eyes on me. Like, for the longest time of my life, I struggled with being perceived in any notion. And now I'm everywhere. Millions of views. All over the world, not just in America, not just in Raleigh, not just in North Carolina, all over the world. I have people sending me DMs, telling me they love me, telling me they want to marry me, telling me all these crazy things. And I'm like, what do I do? I use Instagram as like a diary of a collection of memories. And like, I need to protect my family. I need to protect, the people around me. And like, this is how I do it. Like, I have 800 followers.
Right.
what do I do? And like my friends were telling me, dude, just like delete your posts and just make this like a Palestine page. And I was like, that's gonna take a lot of work. I'm like, well, I just don't know what to do. But my Instagram was crashing from the amount of people that were requesting to follow me. And so I just made the decision like, okay, I'm gonna take on this public platform and I'm gonna turn it into a Palestine page. Well, on February, whatever, I had 800 followers, and today I have 25,000 followers. It's like an insane change from 8 months ago to now. When before I was like struggling with that part of my identity so badly. And now I have people telling me like, you inspire me to speak up. You inspire me to talk about Palestine. You've taught me so much. And I went from being the girl who couldn't public speak to being at the front lines, essentially, of the protests, speaking at protests, chanting at protests, being like my dad's Palestinian warrior daughter, like, and I've learned to, take pride in that part of me, which is another big reason why I like am not afraid. Like I don't wear a mask to anything. Like I remember we went to the DC protest, me and my dad, and there was an interviewer who wanted to film him, and he was like, I can give you a mask if you want. And my dad was just like, I'm not scared. And I was like, you know what? I'm not scared either. So then I stopped wearing a mask. I stopped being afraid of not being employed. And I just kind of like embraced it. Like, why would I be afraid of not being employed for speaking out against Palestine when I am myself Palestinian? Yeah. There's no way to escape it at that point. Like, I get if you're not Palestinian, you're speaking out against Palestine, you have to be more careful. You have to be more cautious. But I am a Palestinian entity. So if I'm not welcome in your business, I don't want to be there. If speaking out for human rights is not welcome in your business, I do not belong there. So for a while, I kept going back to city council, and I kept doing it. And the more I did it, the more people would be all like hyped up. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. This is great, but it's not making change. Yep. It's not making change. Raleigh City Council voted on a ceasefire. It was a 4-4 split, and the notion failed. And so then I addressed the Black people on council, because there are 3 Black people on Raleigh City Council, and 2 of them voted against a ceasefire. Wow. So when I addressed the Black people on council, again, it blew up, but not in a good way. So my point in that speech was, Israelis hate Black people. Israelis hate people of color, because they're Europeans. Mm-hmm. And if you were to go to Israel, they would treat you so poorly, and you're standing with them on American soil, where your ancestors were brought here in slavery, where those people who owned slaves colonized this country. Like, are you not understanding how history is repeating itself? And after that speech, that was the last day of Ramadan. Started Ramadan there, ended Ramadan there. And I just realized my efforts are better focused somewhere else, because these people are not changing their minds. So then I started to do other things, take on other projects, like I said, focus my efforts somewhere else, because Biden already called for a ceasefire. So what is Raleigh City Council calling for a ceasefire going to do? They're right. For a long time, people were like, what do you think your local government can do? And it's like, well, my local government can say that they stand with their constituents and say that democracy actually works. We know better. So now I'm at the point, what can my local government do if Biden calling for a ceasefire doesn't change anything? Or if the ICJ calling for a ceasefire doesn't change anything? Again, it brings me back. What will it take? What more do we need to see? What more do we need to bear witness for Israel to be held accountable? Now I'm just frustrated with the lack of accountability. What will it take? People are asking me, what do you think we can do now? What do you think at a civilian level can we do to make this happen? Or what's the ideal turnout? And at first, it's like, okay, well, the ideal turnout is that they leave Palestine. Now it's more so, I just want people to stop dying. I just want to stop watching these terrible, terrible, terrible things take place because it's difficult, it's gruesome, and it's hard to imagine that this is actually happening to people who are just like me and you. So and it's difficult because it's like, okay, well, if we call for a ceasefire, the only way that this won't happen again is if we end the siege, is if we end the occupation, is if we take Israel out of the situation completely. That's the only way we can guarantee it won't happen again. But how can we guarantee that that will happen in the first place? And so after 8 months of genocide, standing up, speaking out, pretty much putting a target on my back, I'm still stuck with the question, how do we make this end?
You always hear people say, oh, what is me sharing on social media going to do? What is me going to a protest going to do? And I mean, you can be an example of, oh, well, I went to city council, someone shared my video, and, you know, it caught traction and it educated a lot of people. And even though you had a small platform before, it, you know, whether or not you gained 20,000, 30,000 followers, however many, people still saw your post. People still see and get educated. And even when they draw connections, certain connections that maybe they weren't able to draw earlier, that maybe they're on the side of, well, we just don't want people dying, whether they're Palestinian or Israeli, which
There's a cop out.
which I wanted to say, which is a fair assessment initially,
Yes.
right? If someone is uneducated and they see headlines and they see what they've seen since October 7th and on October 7th, and they just say, yeah, we just need peace, Palestine, Israelis, they just need to get along, and I don't want anyone on either side dying. If that was your assessment, like within the first month, I understand that. At this point of how much things have escalated and how many people are informed because of digitally sharing, how many people are protesting, how many cities have called for ceasefire, even if you look at overwhelmingly, not just Democrat, but Republican voters, independent voters, they overwhelmingly support a ceasefire resolution. So if this is what the US constituents believe, even if you don't look at it from a perspective of lives lost, which how separate are you from humanity in that aspect? But even if you don't look at it from that angle, that, hey, the tax dollars that I work so hard to earn my money, the tax dollars that are being taken from my paycheck, that's not going in my best interest. That's going to a foreign country where they're using that money to kill people.
To bomb children.
Bomb
tent cities.
to commit genocide. And even if you're not educated on the 76 years of occupation, which at this point, it's our duty, not just as Americans, but as humans, that we should inform ourselves of what our tax dollars are funding. It's still like that sense of hopelessness that what more can we do?
Yeah.
So obviously your video or your clip, gained the traction that it did. But what would you say to the common audience that maybe doesn't have the platform that you have of, is me sharing pictures really going to do anything? Is me being involved digitally really going to make a difference? Is me going to protests really going to make a difference? I think a lot of people, as much as they can say, yeah, there should be a ceasefire, there should be some sort of action. Well, if this is what majority of the people believe, and there's no action being done by our government, it's almost like it is our duty at this point to do whatever we can, which is to go to protests, go to city halls and speak on it digitally. What would you say to those people who don't think that makes a difference?
I would say that everything makes a difference. And when people ask me, what can I do? I always tell them the best thing that you can do and the easiest thing that you can do is to not stop talking about it. don't stop talking about Palestine because, like I said before, there is power in knowledge. And that's the way that we stop the spread of misinformation. That's the way that we combat these Western influenced headlines. And that's the way that we make a difference. Even talking about it to your parents or opening the discussion with your coworkers or anything even that you think is so minuscule and can't make change will make change. It will make people think about it. It will buzz conversation, and it is important to have these conversations. It is important that we educate ourselves so in turn we can educate others. Because even at a surface level, you can say genocide is bad and not be anti-Semitic. It's so easy. It is so easy. That's at a surface, at the very, very skimming the surface. As soon as you dive deeper into it, then you start to realize how really messed up everything is. And it is so, so important. I'm not condoning not boycotting. Boycotting is important because you need to hit them where it hurts, which is their pockets always. But even if you don't boycott, you still need to be talking about it. You still need to be supporting it and posting as much as you think it will not influence. It might influence one person or two people, which is important because there are also power in numbers, which goes back to protesting. Also important because there are power in numbers. I've been to almost every single protest that has taken place in Raleigh for the last 8 months because it seems like the smallest thing that I can do at a civilian level is show up to a protest to make sure that there are numbers there, to make sure that the police don't get away with anything or the police aren't brutalizing people or stuff like that. At the encampment at UNC, I didn't stay the night. I'm not built for camping. My dad is like, are you gonna stay at the encampment? No, I'm not built for camping. I'm not gonna stay. I'm a here Palestinian for a reason. I cannot be camping. But I would go during the day. I would take my work and I would sit on the lawn, just take up space, be a number. Because that's what the people in Gaza are asking of us. They're asking us to not stop educating, to not stop advocating. It's the only thing that we can do on their behalf. We can't get money in there. We can't get aid in there. We can't give them anything else besides educating people in the masses. So even if you educate 1 or 2 people, it is the most important thing that you can do for Gaza. Given the situation that's there, I, at the very least, would want to do the smallest thing for them. As a Palestinian, even. So like just talking about it has got to be the most important and easiest thing that you can do. Equip yourself with the knowledge so that you can tell people about what's going on so that we can combat all this other, can I curse?
Yeah, go.
All this other bullshit that is muddled and like skewed versions of history. And I can't wait for the day that my kids come home, they tell me about how they learned about Palestine. And I hope one of the photos from the protests or putting up the Palestinian flag at UNC makes it into a textbook because it's so important. And I know that someday the truth will prevail because it always will. And whether it's my kids or my grandkids or whatever, I plan to see it. I bet on seeing it someday. That they will account for what really happened in history and they will reteach it just like they did Christopher Columbus and every other whitewashed version of history.
And do you think that not just people at a platform your size, but people in a larger platform, such as the Kim K's of the world and the people, I know how you feel about this, so that's why I'm bringing it up, but people who have the platform, who have the influence, who have the ability to actually push people, what is kind of their duty given that they have such a larger platform and influence?
So, first of all, let's call them out. Let's list them off. Kim Kardashian, Taylor Swift, all the Kardashians, all the Jenners, including Caitlyn. Taylor Swift. Who else? Those are the two at the top of my mind, bro. Because let me tell you how I feel about people with a platform. As somebody on a pedestal, as somebody who, I don't even have that big of a platform, but I'm very aware all eyes are on me. I am held responsible and accountable for everything that I say and do on this platform and outside of the platform. And even though I don't have as many followers as Kim Kardashian, I'm still very, very vigilant of what I do outside in this world. Because God forbid, I go to Starbucks for a cup of water because I'm dying of thirst and somebody catches me in the act. God forbid. I would never want to be caught dead doing something like that. But as somebody with a platform, a very small platform, I have to be aware of that. I have to know that there is maybe somebody out there who will see me doing something and then they'll be like, okay, well, she does it and she's advocating for Palestine. Then maybe it's okay. But Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift and all these other women and influencers and people on a platform and on a pedestal are responsible for addressing genocide. Like, it's so sickening to see people like this just blatantly pretending like nothing is happening. Which is why you need to block at least one celebrity a day. At least one celebrity a day. If they're not speaking out against Palestine, again, hit them where it hurts, their pockets, boycott their brands, don't even let their ads pop up anywhere. Don't give them the satisfaction, because not addressing something this atrocious should really be punished. It really should be, because if you have a platform, like I said, you are responsible for sending these messages to people who look up to you, to people who you're gonna reach this vast audience, and you know how much influence and pull you have over these people. Taylor Swift specifically, she makes me so upset.
The Swifties could...
Single-handedly, the Swifties could free Palestine. But she's not addressing it. Not only is she not addressing it, but she's just being completely tone deaf, hanging out with her neo-Nazi boyfriend, going like to the football games. She's touring the world. She's releasing new music. Taylor Swift, who doesn't release anything, released new music during genocide and just thought like, okay, well, I'm not gonna address it, but also I'm gonna act like it's not happening. And I'm gonna drop this album. And I'm gonna distract people, and I'm gonna give them something else to think about. Somebody who reclaimed her music, re-recorded all of her music, took the time, paid for the bands. She spent time and money to reclaim what's hers. The right of return is part of the Taylor Swift brand. And she still chooses to stay silent. All these celebrities, on top of our politicians failing us and our governments failing us, we now have these celebrities who we endorse and we put on a pedestal. We made these people famous. They wouldn't be famous without us. They're also failing us. Even micro-influencers, people not as big as Kim Kardashian, small TikTok influencers, people like that, they have a responsibility. You have a reach. Educate people, do something good. Like, make this a beneficial environment for all. I just don't understand. Why is it so hard to say genocide is bad? I don't get it. Genocide in any scope is bad. Killing children is bad. How can you justify things like that? Even if you don't post about it every day, speak on it. Say something. Have a backbone. What are you scared of? Losing money? Taylor Swift is scared of losing money? Taylor Swift takes a private jet 15 minutes up the road. A 15-minute car ride. She takes up the road with a private jet. She has so much money she doesn't even know what to do with. Same for Kim Kardashian. We line their pockets. We make them famous. We give them their platform. So in turn, we can also take away their money, take away their platform, and hold them responsible, because they should be responsible. People always tell me, oh, well, this isn't the place for this. I sometimes comment on like famous people's stuff and I'm like, bro, just speak out about Palestine. And people will berate me. This is not the place for this. Not everything is about this, blah, blah, blah. And then it brings me back to that moment. The world will not stop for me. The world will also not stop for Palestine. In turn, we will not stop for Palestine. Even if these people never speak about it, the truth will prevail. It will always come out. And one day, like I said, I'm betting on it. One day, it will all come out. And these people, cancel culture will be at its peak when Taylor Swift and Kim Kardashian lose their platforms. And I can't wait because I'm praying on their downfall.
Dang, a lot of steam to let out on the
man.
celebrities and politicians.
I can't do it. It's so disappointing.
It's
so disappointing, especially knowing, like I said, we give them this platform. We have the power to take it away. And people are just like, this is irrelevant. No, people are dying, Kim. The same girl who's crying about a diamond earring in the ocean. I lost my diamond earring. People are still dying, bro. And she just couldn't care less. And she has kids. Black kids. It's like, what's wrong with you, dude? I can't. I can't speak on her anymore.
I can't either. I never had a good taste for, there was like very few celebrities that I looked up to, Kobe being one of them. But I think it's interesting to see that obviously tragedies are happening, ongoing genocide, but the people that are waking up, they're disassociating with the politicians, losing faith in the government, as they should.
Yeah.
It's always been corrupt. People are waking up.
Yeah.
They're losing faith in the celebrities. They've always been filthy scumbags that just want money. People are waking up to that.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to say that, 40,000, what's the cost of 40,000 lives? People finally waking up that the corrupt government and these scumbag celebrities don't care about us. No, I don't think it was worth losing 40,000 lives
No, it
for
definitely was not.
anything,
Yeah.
right? But as a result, the taking down of the corrupt government and the taking down of the capitalistic mindset of celebrities, it's all interlinked, and it's crazy how it's all just tracing back to the country that you've been fighting for, your dad's been fighting for, your family's been fighting for, and the Muslim Ummah and Arab world has been fighting for generations now. And it's just very satisfying and calming to see the world waking up. And at the same time, it's also very unfortunate that people are still dying and the Zionists still have such a strong stranglehold, chokehold on everybody in America.
I think it's important, like, that people are starting to realize that Zionism infiltrates every crevice of America. And they keep saying, like, we're gonna free Palestine, but Palestine will free us. And again, as cliche as it sounds, I can literally see the shackles being, like, freeing us from the shackles of all the celebrity culture and all the capitalist culture, and starting to realize that the two-party system just is one party, really, at the end of the day. And as somebody who has zero faith in the government, I do now see the faith in the people's power. And I think it's super important. And as disappointing as it is that this is what needed to happen in order for all of these people to wake up, like you said, it is still very satisfying, because I also not a fan of celebrities. I'll never understand how they get people to feel like they care about them so much. I'll never understand that. They don't know you exist. You are a number to them.
Has Harry Styles called for a ceasefire though?
No, he hasn't. Cancel Harry Styles. Block.
Dang.
Block Harry Styles.
I'll remember that anytime you play Harry Styles around me now.
You know who did call for ceasefire? Zain Malik.
Wow.
Rise up, all the Zains.
All the Zains. Respect. Well, appreciate you coming on, Danyah. And, we'll look forward to seeing more information from your Instagram and looking forward to a free Palestine.
Yeah, inshallah.